Hi, good morning, everyone. Well, from where I'm right now, it is morning, and from wherever you're tuning in from, welcome. Welcome to the podcast with Covenant Diaries. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so happy that you joined. Also, we are Covenant Diaries, and you can also follow us for more updates on this podcast on our Instagram page at Covenant Diaries. If you're new, joining us for the first time again, welcome. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. So, on our Instagram page, we're going to be posting stuff about updates regarding our podcast. We also will be providing links for where our podcast will be streaming from. Basically, just all the details regarding this podcast. We're going to be leaving those information on our Instagram page. Do you all to follow us on that platform? Well, to cut right down to the T, like I had mentioned again, we are Covenant Diaries, and my name is Rachel. And here with me is my sister,
Rebecca. Welcome. God bless you all.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Literally sitting across from me. But yeah, we are going to be talking more on really inside life of a pastor's kid. We're going to be answering a few questions, a few curious questions that people are wondering about, or even pastors' kids themselves are wondering about. Things that are in their mind that they're not able to verbalize, they're not able to speak of because they don't really understand per se what they're going through. So yeah, we're gonna be talking more a lot in life stories, just keeping it real.
Pretty much.
Really, really real. So
Pretty
if
much.
you're not really used to realness, it might not be really suitable for you. But if you want to hear the real life things going on in the life of a pastor's kid, this is a sweet spot for it. So right down to the chase. For the questions we're gonna ask, it's not in any particular order of importance, but Becky, we can make this fun. So you pick a number from 1 to 6, and then I'm gonna read out the questions, and then each of us can take turns answering whatever it is, and keeping it real.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
All right, you ready?
Okay.
Okay, pick a number from 1 to 6.
I think I'm gonna go with the first one, number one.
Oh, okay. All right. So number one, the question was, how would you describe yourself and your experience growing up as a pastor's kid? Oh, sorry. By the way, before you answer that, Becky and I actually pastor's kids, and down the line we're going to be bringing in more pastor's kids to answer a couple questions. And if you do have questions along the line, just definitely leave it on our Instagram page, and we're gonna answer it the next season or the next podcast episode that we're gonna have. We're gonna answer all your questions or your curious thoughts and whatnot. All right. Sorry, Becky. Go ahead.
So how would I describe myself? I honestly think that um I think I'm more of an introvert, you know?
Really?
Yes, yes. Yes. I am more of an introvert. I love to just have my own personal space. Um I love to just be by myself. A lot of the times, I don't like to be in the crowd. Yeah. Um I'm more of a person who tends to shy away from people a lot. I know, even though, like, when people see me, honestly, people actually think I'm an introvert. Literally. People think I'm actually an introvert. You know, I've always been a shy person. I don't know. That's just me in general.
But sometimes you look like an extrovert, though. You're always around people.
How? Always? You say always, like that's an
Yeah,
everyday
like
thing.
you, not like every day, but like you seem more better socially when you're socializing with people. You seem like an extrovert.
Yeah, but do you know how awkward that feels?
Oh,
It's almost like I have to wear a mask to fit in,
okay.
you know? It's almost like I have to wear something to fit in, which I think is very unhealthy. But in some instances, I'm usually myself. I don't really care. But like in general, I honestly,
Mhm.
I don't like to be the center of attention.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't like to be out there. I love to be like in a box where I'm hiding to do my stuff, and my stuff is just speaking for me outside.
Okay, good. We're going to bring you out of the box in this podcast. All right, the second part of the question: what's your experience growing up as a pastor's kid?
Oh my gosh. That's yikes. That's a lot of experience. First one I'm going to touch on is the fact that growing up, we grew up in a large family. You
True.
know,
Yeah.
it was such a huge family, and what I struggle with reconciling it's like every time after church ends, you have people coming over to the house uninvited, uninvited.
That
Yeah,
is so
it's not
true.
like when people can call you on the phone and say, "Hey, I'm coming over so and so day," right? But then back in Nigeria,
Oh
right?
yeah. Just a brief context. We grew up in Nigeria, but we moved to America. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you have people, a lot of people just showing up, and then I remember mom will always have to cook this huge food just to make sure that everybody's well fed. And another thing else, another experience that I had was, you know how people always say, you're a pastor's child, you need to live better, you need to be better,
Yeah.
you should be an example to other people.
Ugh.
It's like everything you do, people always want to criticize. Right? It doesn't matter if it's good, it doesn't matter if it's bad. People always want to criticize. And the fact that, let's say some activity is going on and everybody's saying, oh, you're pastor's child, you don't need to do that. I mean, your dad owns the church.
Like,
It's
point of correction. Nobody owns the church. Okay. Like
like
no one owns the church. Jesus owns the church.
it's the concept that your dad owns the church. Like, who told you my dad owns the church? He is not the owner of the church. You know, like, hey, it's like everywhere you go, people just keep looking at you in some
Yeah.
type of way. Like it's almost like you can't even fit in anywhere.
That's true.
And God forbid, let's say you mess up. Oh
Oh,
wow,
that's
she's a
worse.
pastor child. She
Why
just
did you
messed
do
up.
that?
I cannot believe this. She goes around telling people how to live life, and look at what she's doing. Yeah,
Um,
those are the experiences that I actually encountered. Which I felt like was really suffocating.
okay. That is so true. For me personally, I would say that I'm an introverted extrovert.
Both, yeah.
Yeah, I'm both. I can be an introvert and I can be an extrovert, but mainly because I say this mainly because a lot of times because of the ministry, I'm literally out there. If you see me, you would think that I'm a people person, that I love to be around people. And fair enough, I do love being around people, but most of the time I actually really do like to have my own space. Like I just feel like when I'm around people, like I give out so much energy. I give out too much that when I come back I feel so drained and exhausted. Like being alone gives me more power, gives me more strength because when I'm out there with people, I get drained so much a lot. But I think the ministry has really brought out that side of my extrovertedness, if that's a word. Oh my gosh, my experience growing up as a pastor's kid, I have a lot to unpack with that. I'm going to keep it really brief. Let's see. My experience growing up as a pastor's kid. I would say, in general, I'm so glad and I'm so grateful that I grew up in such a loving family. Like anyone close around us would attest to that. Well, if I
Mhm.
say so myself, my family is very, very loving, very affectionate.
Mhm.
Actually, way too affectionate and loving that sometimes it gets taken for granted.
Mhm.
So I grew up in that environment where I just grew up seeing everyone else living with us as part of family.
Mhm.
There was
That's
no
true.
clear distinction that anyone was an outsider.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So
That's
a
true. You're right.
pastor's house was like a mission house that everyone was one family.
Yep.
So
Yep.
when I was born, when I grew up, I just identified everyone as my uncles, my aunties, even though they're not really biologically related to my
That's
parents.
so
But
true.
that's the
That's so
kind of
true.
atmosphere that my parents had cultivated,
Mhm.
in the ministry, that everyone was part of, the same. As long as you were in church, you were one family. Like
Yep. That's
you were
true.
related with the blood of Jesus Christ,
That's
not
right.
like biologically, but
That's true.
that was the kind of atmosphere I grew up in. So a lot of times I would say I didn't really have so much privacy to be
Mm,
myself.
that's huge.
I feel like
Yes.
at some point my life were dictated for me by people outside. People think that when you were born in a Christian home or you're a pastor's kid, you're automatically saved. It doesn't really work that way. Most of the times, it's sometimes really hard for pastor's kid to be saved
That's
because
true.
it's that sense of entitlement that they're in a godly family, so
Hmm.
they're religious.
Hmm.
It takes true repentance and true consecration a pastor's kid to really surrender their life to God.
And
Really takes,
prayers,
yeah,
consistent prayers
that
from your
takes a really
parents.
deep encounter because
Yep,
you're already in that atmosphere. You think that you're connected with God,
that's true.
but it's just the influence of your parents'
Hmm. Rubbing off on you.
relationship with
Yep,
God
yep,
that's kind of like covering you. The
yep.
glory is covering you, and you think that glory is related with you and God. There
Hmm.
is no relationship with you and God if you have not fully come to surrender to
Hmm.
God and like make peace with Him.
Hmm.
So that was kind of my background until God turned my life around and I surrendered my life to God. But other than that, yeah, it was like my sister had mentioned, Rebecca had mentioned, it was really rough at some point, having to live in a glass house.
That's
That's what it was like.
yes. You just put the
We
word
not only we were living in a glass house. Our business was literally
everywhere.
everyone's business.
Yep, yep.
There's no how I can do things and not
Be seen.
nor it getting around the whole community because
Hmm.
we had such a small community back then
Yeah.
in Nigeria. Like everyone knows your business, especially that you're a past kid in that
Oh my
block.
gosh.
The entire city knows what you're doing. Like, oh, girl, you doing that? Your mama knows about that? Your dad
Hmm.
knows about that?
That's true.
Ooh. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like that situation that I didn't know how to be myself because I wanted to please people. I
Hmm.
wanted to do a lot of things to be on people's good side, to be self-righteous or to be righteous in the eyes of people and not in the eyes of God because I'm a
Hmm.
pastor's kid. So I have to be in that box and do things even though my heart was not really right with God. But yeah, but thank God that God had saved me. So that was my experience. I went through a lot of scrutiny from the society, a lot of things like you can't really do
Even
things
from
without
church
getting.
members as well
Yeah.
too.
Oh my gosh. That actually scrutiny from the church members was
The-
more intense than
yep,
people outside
that's
because the
true.
people outside
They
like
don't
wouldn't
really
really
know
know
you.
like
Yeah.
you like that and they don't have any expectations of you
Hmm.
because they don't know where you're coming from like
Yeah,
that.
that's
But
true.
people on the inside, it be your own people, guys. Like
Yeah.
literally, it be your own people. But
That's
like,
true.
but then you think about it. Not everyone in church is really, saved and really sanctified.
Which makes sense.
Like I've heard preachers say that church is a spiritual hospital, which is really true. There are
Hmm.
people from the world who the world hasn't left them, so
Hmm.
they're trying to project their weaknesses on you
Hmm.
because they think that you should live that life that you preach,
Hmm.
even though they're not really certain for sure or giving you an opportunity to really experience that salvation yourself.
Hmm.
They're kind of like forcing you to experience it, so
Oh,
you can be an item of
mhm.
judgment for them, like
Yeah, and sometimes because they feel like they haven't really had your type of life, so most times they become very envious and jealous. Like, wow,
yeah.
she's from this family. They see all this love, they see all this affection being shown. It's like, okay, well, I come from a chaotic family,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't have that. So now it's like, okay, I'm gonna be projecting myself on you, so I
Yeah.
can bring you down, right? So you can be on the same level with me. And majority of the time, is like you said, it's usually people who don't have any existing relationship with God,
Yeah.
just religious people, right? And the religious people are who they sound like the Pharisee. They're
Yeah.
pretty much living the lifestyle of the Pharisee. So now they see that you are trying to live for God. It's like, wow, okay, now she's better than me.
But yeah, that was pretty much an experience. And if I we're gonna talk more in depth on that in upcoming podcasts. I mean,
Hmm.
we're gonna invite more people,
Hmm.
other pastors, kid. We're gonna like shed more light into it.
Hmm.
It would get more deeper and more real
Yep.
than this.
Yep.
But we're kind of like trying to go on the surface a little bit. But like the more we talk about it, the more we go deeper. We're not gonna like divulge
Yeah.
everything all at once. So it's bit by bit. Okay. All right. Next number.
No, you're gonna be
You know.
taking. It's your turn to pick a number because I picked first.
Okay. All right. Just because I'm kind of like in that season of fours right now, I'm gonna pick the number four. Four says if you look at your ministry now, what do you say reflects your parent, and what part is different?
You.
Ooh, that one is a good one.
Hmm. What part do you say reflect your parents? I think the part that I would say reflect both parents is just the part of selflessness.
Mm,
You know,
true.
selflessness, especially with dad. He's a very, very
Oh my
selfless.
gosh, God
Oh my
bless him.
gosh. Growing up and seeing him just being there for people, even at 2 a.m. people are calling him, you know, and every time people call him, he's always showing up for them, right?
Mm.
Even though,
How many people show for him? Sorry, let me stop.
but yeah, he shows a lot of selflessness, and even growing up and watching that, I used to ask myself, why is this man,
I know,
why do
God,
you have
why
to
is he doing
sacrifice
that?
yourself for
I know.
people? Why do you have to do that?
It was so
You know,
hard to understand growing
yes, because I was wondering, why do you always have to be there for people?
and
Even
then
at
the
the
same
expense
people
of
try
your
like stabbing him
exactly.
in the back and stuff.
See, that's the pain that I have to constantly,
Mm,
constantly have to deal with. Watching him going through a lot and then having to be there at the same time for people
yeah,
who never usually ask him. They don't. I'm sure most times, even sometimes when I overhear the conversation, I don't hear them saying, "How are you doing?" It's
that's
just straight,
true.
"Hey, Pastor, can you pray for me? I'm experiencing so and so. Can you pray for me?" I think,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
that's the I don't know. I guess you have
Mhm.
to completely die to self,
Yeah,
you know. But yeah, that's the part of and mom too. The same
yeah,
way selflessness. And mom is much more of a very, very compassionate person.
yeah.
And like even one of the members was even saying how genuine she
Yeah,
is.
anyone who knows mom knows that
Yeah,
she's so affectionate.
very, very genuine. Her laughter is not fake. And every
That's
time she
true.
sees people come in, she
She's
she
so open.
usually asks them, "Hey, how was your day? How was your week? Are you okay?
So
Are
true.
you doing good? What's going on?" And people love that. And she loves that, and she does that out of the genuineness of her heart.
Yeah,
Not because she wants attention or not because she has to.
yeah.
You know, that's really so much what I admire about them, and that's
So, what part of your ministry is different from them? Like, in what way would you say that your ministry is different?
listen, I feel like I'm still struggling the path of that selfless part because I feel like most times I find myself being selfish. I'm just being honest.
I actually
Um,
agree.
wow, that's really messed up.
I mean, considering how many times that I beg you for food, and you're like, "Girl,"
you know, yes,
I
I
think it's that food part. Like, I don't know, like
it's
food
it's
got you on
it's.
chokehold.
I think it's the part where I have to constantly have to surrender to God. Yeah, I think the part of being selfless is I don't know, like most times I have to ask myself, like, why, how, why, in what way do I have to present myself? I have to,
Mhm.
sacrifice myself to other people, you know, even in the midst of my own, even when it makes me uncomfortable,
Yeah,
right? And then you have to look back at what Jesus Christ did while he was on earth, you know?
it's really the grace of God, really.
Yeah. So yes, I do have a struggle of being selfless. I'll be honest. And sometimes I'm a very selfish person.
Yeah.
Most times, sometimes it can be just me, myself, and I. I'm
Like,
being
we're
real.
really, like we said, we're keeping it real here. So
I'm being honest.
I
And
don't know if anyone else out there can relate, but this is more for a community for us to, grow together and learn from each other and like learn our struggles. But
that's
yeah,
that's why I pray every day that God should teach me, how to be selfless and be more like Him. Because it's not easy.
yeah, it's not easy.
Sometimes I feel like no, I don't want to give you no, no, I don't. No, I really don't. I mean, when you take a look at some people that you encounter, you're looking at them like, wow, this person don't even deserve anything from you. Why do I have to
True.
give? Why? Why?
It is hard, I would say.
It
It really
is
is hard.
putting people before you.
Even when the most painful part of it is that when people who feel entitled and don't really appreciate what you do, you still have to continue to be selfless because that's the that's like the way that Jesus Christ lived and the example that he showed us.
Yeah.
I also would agree too. I mean, I learned a lot of selflessness from my
You
parents.
are very, very selfless.
I'm not 100%.
Girl, you
There
are. I've seen. Listen, let me tell you guys. My sister is the most selfless person I've ever met.
there are
You
areas
know,
I'm not selfless that I'm still working on.
I'm I'm
Really.
I'm telling the people. I'm not telling you.
Okay, sorry.
She's a very, very selfless person. I've seen my sister, like, most times I see her buy stuff for people, and I'm sitting and asking her, why are you doing
We're
this?
not talk about that.
Why why are you doing this? But every time I see my sister, she always sacrifices herself, and putting other people before her. And when I see that, I truly admire that. And it challenges me to every day go on my knees and tell God, please make me selfless, not just like my sister, but like you.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Well, like I was saying, I don't like my trumpet being blown. Okay.
Well, you said we
Yeah.
can be vulnerable, like.
And the other part I would say that I've learned from them is consistency.
Mm,
My parents are so consistent. Like in their ministry, I've seen them being consistent, even when there is really no reason for them to be consistent.
hmm
I've seen them like walk that walk where they preach faith when there really is nothing
That's
to have
true.
faith on. There's nothing to hope for.
That's true.
Like I've learned that a lot from them, that consistency, even when there's really no audience.
That's
Knowing
true.
that God has
Oh
an
my
audience,
gosh, that's so
God is
true.
the main audience you should be looking after. Like I've
That's
learned that a
so
lot from them. Like
true.
even when no one's watching, they're still doing what they're doing for
hmm
God.
Not
I think,
faking it. It's
yeah,
just real,
I think I've
genuinely.
picked that up for them, and I've learned the art of being consistent, even when people. Oh my gosh, ministry is like a training for marriage. I would say because there are times in the ministry that the pressure would come on so strong. Like you have people criticizing you,
hmm
telling you what to do, and you're working so hard doing what you need to do at that moment based on what you know, but it seems like what you're doing is not enough. There are people complaining, there are people doing this, there are people doing that, but you just keep doing it. I think at some point I struggled with that, but I had to surrender that part of my life to God, that even though I'm being criticized, even though every effort that I'm doing is being scrutinized, give me the grace to keep doing what I need to do, because
hmm
that's literally what Jesus did. When he came to this world, a lot of people were saying all kinds of things about him,
hmm
but he had a mission to accomplish,
That's right.
and the things that people say didn't prevent him from accomplishing that
That's
vision.
true.
Like people would say, "Oh, he's spending too much time with sinners. Like what
That's
kind of a person is
right.
he?"
hmm
Like when he's not spending time with people, they're complaining. When he's
He's
spending
spending
time
time.
with people, they're complaining.
That's so
Literally
good. Yeah.
every single thing. I'm like, if Jesus had gone through this and he was still focused, he's laid that foundation for us
hmm
that we follow through with. So I think that's something I've really learned from them. And also, what else? I have also, I think what's different from my ministry, I would say, with them is that I'm more out there socially than they
Yes, you
are.
are. Yes, you
Like
are.
my parents could stay hidden for however long, like they would be okay with that because they live for an audience of one. Not saying that it's wrong to have social media, but like what are you using your platform to do? Are
That's
you,
right.
is it glorifying God?
hmm
I think that's the whole essence. Even when we talked about this with dad regarding the podcast, like it took him a while, but he saw he saw the whole point of this, and
hmm
he understands the ministry and he understands the vision. So I think they're gradually, being more open to that social aspect of the ministry, because I mean, how else are we going to reach out to a lot of people if we don't, be on the platform, a global platform that really announces the gospel to everyone around
hmm
the world? So I think that's a different part where I'm different. And also, personally, my personality is just I like to give 100% in everything I do. So
That's
I'm a
true.
bit very
She's
extra.
telling the
Like
truth.
I'm a
Yep.
bit very extra when it comes to God. Like it's all 100% or nothing at all. Like it would break me and it would ruin me when I don't give 100%. And that's also, it could be a bad thing, because sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
like, it puts me into a deep worry when I feel like I'm not doing good, I'm not giving my best enough,
Mm-hmm.
but that's something I'm trying to find a balance with.
Mm-hmm. And
All
sorry
right.
to cut you off. To revert back to the aspect that you indicated, consistency.
Hmm.
I think one of the thing that actually strikes me, the good thing that actually strikes me a lot with our parents is that they have a goal, right?
That's
The
true.
goal is to win souls, and the goal is to make sure that everyone goes to heaven.
Yes, they're heaven
That's
minded.
yes. So
Absolutely.
that's actually one of the things that stood out to me, you know, and that's the consistency that keeps them going
That's
because they have a
true.
goal.
They have a goal. Yeah, we definitely are submitted to people who know where they're going, who
Yep.
have a vision,
Yep.
and they carry along everyone each step of the way
Hmm.
in fulfilling that vision. All right, I think we've answered the first and the fourth question. So
Yes.
pick a different number.
Um, I would say number 5.
Ooh, I love that number.
What advice will you give to other PK?
Ooh, that's a good one. How the pastors
Oh my
kid.
god.
What advice did you give them?
I would say first, I think is complete surrender to God.
Yes.
you know because when you have an existing relationship and intimacy with God, regardless of what people say against you, it won't really phase you,
That is true.
right? If you have a very strong foundation and intimacy and existing relationship with God, right, no matter how much stone is being thrown at you, God will give you grace to overcome them.
That is true.
If you don't have any existing relationship with God, it's gonna be very, very difficult, because one of the things that will usually happen is that you're actually gonna find yourself compromising, right?
That's
First,
true.
one of your legs is in A, and then the other leg is in B. So now you're torn in between. Should I actually, listen to other people, or should I actually listen to God?
So true.
So when you have a very solid foundation, an intimacy, existing relationship with God, right? God will guide you through the process. And like I said, no matter how much stone is being thrown at you, He will always give you the grace not to listen to people. Let me
Hmm.
use myself for an example, right? I struggle with low self-esteem.
Hmm.
This was
That's
when I was
true.
living in sin.
Same.
You know, I had problem with low self-esteem. When people who don't know God come and talk to me, I feel myself compromising, trying to please them, right? Try because I'm trying to fit in. But when I encountered God, when I had a relationship with God, all of a sudden it's almost like an energy
Yeah.
boost.
For real. Like, oh, do you
I
think, girl?
felt that energy boost. Right? When people came
It's the
across
aura
me
of God's
saying
presence.
saying all those
Woo!
nasty things to me, I was so unfazed. I'm like, who are you? What audacity do you even have to speak to me? Because then I found
Girl.
God. I have my relationship with God.
That's
So
right.
I was so unfazed by what every other person was saying against me, because I already found God and I had a relationship with God. But before then, I was out. My whole foundation was shaking. Anything like people throw at me, oh my
Mm.
gosh, I find myself crying, and then the next thing I do is trying to please people, trying to compromise. But with God, I found my purpose. With God, I found value.
Mm.
With God, I found my high self-esteem.
Come on now.
It's not pride. It's that when you find Jesus, there's something that God instills in you.
Mm.
You become fearless and bold,
Come on now.
right? If you were always a shy person, when you encounter Jesus, He gives you a boldness. Yes, that's my advice.
For me, I have three advice for pastors'
3.
kids. Three, because I love that number three.
Okay.
One, like Rebecca said, it would be so great, and it would do your destiny and your life eternally a huge blessing or a huge significance when you do surrender to God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it took me a while to realize that, growing up, being in that family, you do things, at some point you start doing things mechanically because you see your parents do it.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And because you're told that that's the right thing to do, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily because you want to or because you you have a relationship with the one that you're doing it to, but you're
Hey.
doing it out of obligation
Mm.
because you've seen it. You want to be righteous and you want to please your parents,
Mm-hmm.
and you want your parents to think that, oh, what they're preaching is working on you, but
Mm-hmm.
it really isn't because you haven't really entirely surrendered.
Mm. That makes
So I would
sense.
say that you find God for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the reason why. Not just only because of God's protection, but the intimacy, the intimate relationship with God, the wholeness that comes from that. Oh my gosh. I don't think there's anything that can quantify that peace. That peace that comes from intimacy with God,
Yes. Yes.
that wholesomeness that comes, like
Mm.
your whole being, your whole mind is normal, is sane. Like the thing that people struggle with identity crisis, which, like I mentioned, I went through that a lot. I didn't have any form of identity. Like I was struggling with my identity because I didn't know who I really was. A lot of people outside, I was listening to so much external voices on how I should live
Mm.
my life as a
Mm.
pastor's kid. So I did that to please people, or I tried to be cool at some point to people who didn't know God so I could fit in. That at some point was taking me down a very dangerous road. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was compromising so much to the detriment of my own mental health. I got a lot of social anxiety because I was doing things just to fit in. It led to a lot of depression, it led to a lot of anxiety. It led to a lot of, you know,
Fear.
conformity to the
Mm-hmm.
world that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really necessary. And it created a lot of, I would say, evil soul ties that shouldn't really happen
Mm.
because I mingled with the world and I wanted to please the world and
Hey.
not God. So coming to Christ, I had to start breaking all those soul ties that I had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All those influences, even from people
Mm.
that were demonically influenced,
Mm-hmm.
that were having so much power and control over my life. I had to like break
Mm.
that influence from them.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that happens when you completely surrender to God is that before Christ, the world controls you. But
Hey. Hey.
after
Hey.
Christ, when
Hey.
you
Hey.
surrender to God, you have control over the world.
Aye.
So
Oh.
people, friends who used to control you,
Yes.
you have more power. I'm
Hey.
saying this experientially. You have more power and influence over them to
Mm-hmm.
dictate
Mm-hmm.
how they act around you.
Mm-hmm.
Because scripture says that the heart of the king is in God's hand. So when you pray and, order your day, the first thing you do when you wake up and you pray and have that moment with God, it gives you a different, I don't like to use the word aura. I don't know how to express it. Like
Presence.
it gives you a different presence, a
Mm-hmm.
different glory around
Mm-hmm.
people. Like your presence becomes more pleasant to people.
Hey.
Like you carry an
Subtle.
influence. You create like a glory, like a
Mm-hmm.
royal presence that commands a lot of attention to your favor.
Let
You
me.
know, and that's something I struggled with. Because I tried so hard to get attention from the world, and the world didn't give it to me because I wasn't fitting in to their own standards. They were controlling me. But when I have Jesus now,
Mm-hmm.
I have that attention from God. And because the scripture says that I am the apple of his eyes, wherever God's eyes is, wherever his eyes is where his spotlight is.
Mm-hmm.
And when where you're on the spotlight of God, you're on the spotlight of everyone else around you because his eyes, his light is shining on you. And the world is seeing that. They may not know what is attracting them to you, but it's that presence and glory of God that is attracting them to you. And you connecting with God will be able to influence them for God because now you're under an influence. The control is different. God is now the owner of your life. You're controlled by his presence and influence, and you're able to radiate that outside. No longer does the world control you anymore. So,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah.
So, before you gave your life to Christ, did you ever feel or experience any form of voidness or emptiness in you
Yeah,
and
I
anxiety?
did. I always felt like empty. Like I didn't know what it was, but I felt like every single time I felt lonely. I felt like there is no, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like a strong sense of emptiness. Like I'm
Voidness.
nothing. Like
Mm.
I felt like I was useless to everyone around me. I felt like there was nothing
Mm.
worthy inside of me. Like there was no worth inside of me. But when I gave my life to Christ, I felt that sense of completeness.
The
I felt so
wholeness.
much value.
Mm-hmm.
Even more when I've started ministry officially,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started feeling satisfaction. Because
Ah.
you will surrender your life to God, but when you don't find your purpose on earth,
Mm-hmm.
you're still not doing anything.
You're not
So
satisfied.
yeah, you
Okay.
don't feel that sense of satisfaction.
Okay.
I'm telling you guys this, like when I didn't start ministry, like yes, you give your life to Christ, but the purpose of you giving your life to Christ is also to influence others,
Mm-hmm.
to let others see the love of Jesus Christ and also come to the Lord, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not God's will for
Mm-hmm.
anyone at all
Mm-hmm.
to perish, okay? So the purpose of you being saved is for you to also influence others to see the love of God and also be saved as well, not just only for your own benefit and for your own consumption.
Mm-hmm.
It's for everyone else too.
Um, the reason why I asked that question, because a lot of times, a lot of pastors' kids who are out there who also struggle with a sense of, or experience that voidness, that emptiness. Most times when they in the midst of a wrong crowd, they might tend
Mm,
to revert to substance use or
that is
yeah,
true.
drinking just to fill that gap because they
No
don't
way.
understand what is going on in them.
Mm,
I can attest to that because most times, even when I was living in sin, I was in school, I felt that voidness, I felt that emptiness, and at the same time I felt like there was something wooing me, but I
mm,
didn't understand what it was. And one day, I asked that. I said, "Hey, I don't know why I keep feeling the emptiness, emptiness, emptiness." And that is not the kind of person that will usually go like full blown,
yeah.
right? He will really go full blown, but the specific things it's almost like a coded word
Mm,
that with time you get to realize, oh my gosh, this is actually what he meant, right? And when I had my encounter with God, and that voidness was filled. And then I understood that the emptiness was supposed to be filled by God and not substance
mm,
use, right? I honestly didn't know that. But I'm actually grateful that I didn't put myself in a situation or in the midst of other people where
mm.
I had to turn into drugs or turn into drinking,
But
right?
you know what? We actually kind of in that kind of environment,
We were
especially
in
the
that
neighborhood.
environment. We
See,
were in
God
that,
is so
yeah, I
faithful, like because
know, I know.
we're in a neighborhood and we're in an environment
It's supposed to.
that we are exposed to drugs,
Hmm.
alcohol, and stuff. Not like our family.
Hmm.
Obviously, our family, there is no such thing as alcohol use or anything in our family. But like in the neighborhood that we lived in, there were a lot of kids there drinking alcohol,
Yes.
smoking.
Hmm.
So even if our parents we're away like doing work and like we're going to school,
We had the choice.
we had so many
Yes,
opportunities to do that, because
yes. Oh
even
my
at
gosh,
school
yes,
too, there were
yes.
kids who would like go outside of
Mm-hmm,
school to like
mm-hmm,
smoke and like
mm-hmm,
do all those things.
mm-hmm,
Like we're like it literally was in our face
mm-hmm.
every time, but I think it's just the grace of God that we did
Yes,
not
yes,
venture into it.
absolutely.
And also it also has to do with,
Prayers from my parents,
yeah,
long
long prayer, a
seated
lot of
prayers.
prayers,
Yeah.
a parents interceding over
Mm-hmm.
us. And it, man, I'm just so grateful for the power of prayer, because it really does a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And to so many pastors' kid who don't really have that, that privilege of, having an environment that cultivates that fear of God, that you're not able to use drugs or anything. I still want you to know that there is still hope for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to use all of that to fill your void. And some of you may say that, oh, I have cried out to God, I've called out to God, and He's not hearing me.
Oh yes.
He does. That goes into another thing that I wanted to advise them:
Mm-hmm.
to be transparent with God.
Yes.
You know, this is really funny or interesting, I would say. When you give your life to Jesus Christ, yes, He forgives you, and you confess your sins to Him, He forgives you and He cleanses you. The next point that you should delve into is being vulnerable to Him. That took me a long while to really understand and to unlock. Is until I made a couple mistakes in my life that I realized that, wait a minute, I'm repeating the same mistakes because I haven't really come out clean to God on my
Mm.
weaknesses.
Oh
I haven't
wow.
come out clean to God on how I really feel about things like this.
But you didn't
So
understand though. How would
I
you
didn't
know?
understand. actually, I was the kind of person that never thought that I would have a relationship with God, because as
Mm.
Pastor Skid, it seemed to me back then in the days like only pastors that God talked to. That's what I thought in my mind. I only thought
That's
that
so
God
funny.
only speaks to pastors because, oh, my dad hears from God, my mom hears from God. So
I
it could
mean,
only be pastors that, we
chosen
didn't,
ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't really have that luxury of deep
Intimacy.
intimate knowledge of God
Hmm.
like we do now. Back then in the days, like we didn't, there was no, okay, we're not trying to like tell our age. We're not that old, guys, okay? Like I'm trying to say that there wasn't social media much back then where
Hmm.
we could listen to,
Hmm.
word. And back then, like we didn't have that luxury of always being under series of deep teachings of the
Hmm.
word of God.
Hmm.
So we're ignorant,
Hmm.
it took me a while when I gave my life to Christ and I kept on repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. I'm like, wait a minute, why am I not doing this? But I'm like, wait, I'm be honest with myself that I'm weak in this area, because I at that point I used to like to think that I was strong and I needed to be righteous, but righteousness starts with having a right standing with God before you start having a right relationship with
Hmm.
your fellow humans.
Hmm.
So that part of having a right standing with God is being honest with yourself and being transparent with God and your weaknesses. So when I realized that, I had to come to God and tell God, this is who I am. When there are people who encountered Jesus in the Bible and they were able to tell God, Jesus, who is also God, who they were.
Like King David.
Yeah. King David had that relationship, and that's really what challenges me. Like he had that, he understood that the whole essence of intimacy with God is being transparent
Mm.
and being, when he had that relationship with Bathsheba,
Mhm.
and Prophet Nathan came to him and told him in a parable of a different person. Just like David, I was
Mm.
so quick to judge others,
That's
like,
right.
oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
But on the flip side, I was doing the same thing.
Hmm.
So, and that's all also coming from, trying to be righteous before men
Mm.
and not being righteous with God.
Hmm.
So, like when David, what differentiates David with other people is that David immediately, that Prophet Nathan told him, that man that you're condemning is you. He immediately broke down and asked God for forgiveness. That's the whole different, like, vulnerability. When you're faced with your weaknesses, when you are brought to account with your sins, are you quick to put the blame on someone else? Are you quick to accept the blame? You know, it all started from, the Garden of Eden, when, Eve ate of the fruit that she wasn't supposed to eat. And when God had asked Adam, instead of Adam taking the blame and responsibility, because God has placed him in charge
Hmm.
of everything
Hmm.
in the garden, and
Hmm.
also he also was, in that relationship with God, in that intimate relationship with God, to oversee everything, and he should have been there when his wife was, talking to Satan in form of the serpent.
Hmm.
She was busy making friends with people who she shouldn't be making friends with.
Hmm.
And Adam was around. He didn't say anything. He wasn't involved. So God accorded him that responsibility to oversee everything
Hmm.
in that area. But when he wasn't fulfilling that obligation, when he wasn't doing that, he didn't take responsibility for his negligence. He
Hmm.
didn't take responsibility for his faults. He put the blame on the woman that God gave him.
Hmm.
So that really, when I had that realization in my mind, and I look back at what Adam had did in the Garden of Eden, I'm like, I am the same way. I am not taking responsibility for my actions, for my weaknesses, because I feel like when I take responsibility for it, it condemns me automatically and it makes me feel like I'm unworthy. But that's the whole
Mm.
essence that Jesus Christ came came to do. Like he came to
Mm-hmm.
die for the unworthy
Mm,
people.
mm,
He doesn't condemn us, but he
mm-hmm,
convicts us of our sins.
mm-hmm.
What the devil does is to condemn us.
Make us feel
And I
you.
think that's exactly what I was afraid of, that
Mm,
condemnation, that
mm,
guilt.
mm-hmm,
So instead of like accepting my weaknesses
mm-hmm,
and bringing the guilt to God, I
mm,
would push it away
mm-hmm,
and not deal with it at that moment. So I was piling up a lot of faults and sins,
mm-hmm,
that I didn't bring up to God. And it was making me repeat the whole thing over and
mm-hmm,
over again. But when I started proactively, I told God, in order for me not to go back to this again, I want you to give me the grace to be honest with you and to be transparent with you. And not only that, to also have an introspection, a sense of introspection, like
mm-hmm,
being able to evaluate my feelings and my thoughts,
mm-hmm,
why they're happening, and be proactive.
mm-hmm,
When you sense that your thought pattern is
mm-hmm,
going tangent, is going into a sinful disposition, like when you know that your sinful thoughts are
mm-hmm,
coming in,
mm-hmm,
like you proactively let God know, like,
mm-hmm,
oh, this is what I'm thinking, forgive me. And or whatever feeling that I'm feeling that is inordinate, like it's not of you, it
mm-hmm.
doesn't give you the glory, like take this feeling away from me so I can be clean, so I can be whole. You having that grace to be very introspective, like look, with always continually evaluate your emotions. Are they in line with the word of God? Are they in line with God's will? Are your thoughts in line with God's will? That art of transparency, and also taking into account what your weaknesses are. Like if you know that you struggle with lust, or you struggle with whatever, anger or whatever it is, and someone is triggering you in that area, you let go know, I'm triggered in this area, like deliver me from this. And if you're in that environment and you're able to leave, like flee away from that temptation. The Bible says to flee, not to just walk or not to just stay and like entertain it. Flee. If you're
Mm-hmm.
able to in that environment, flee. And ask God, always be open to God, that I'm feeling this way and I don't want it to escalate into something. He will always come to your rescue when you're vulnerable and transparent with Him. I think that unlocked a different dimension in my walk with God when I understood that. And by God's grace, He helps me to be transparent. And whenever I'm not very conscious of the thoughts that I'm thinking, I ask Him to bring to my mind, my consciousness, the evil thoughts that comes to my mind. So I would take it to Him and He would take it away from my
Mm-hmm.
mind. So I think that art of being constantly transparent with God, it would do you such a huge favor. It would be such a great blessing to your walk with God. And also, I think I talked about salvation, intimacy, transparency. And I would say the other part of, surrendering your life to God is to be able to fight spiritual battles. Listen, the spiritual battles as a pastor's kid is real. Oh my goodness. Listen, your parents are always praying for people. They're always coming in contact with people who have demonic influences, who
Mm-hmm.
have witchcraft influences,
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot. So they're always in opposition to the kingdom of darkness. And if the devil can't get them, guess who's going to come for?
The children.
They're
That's
going to
right.
come for their seeds. The
Mm-hmm.
seeds of the righteous are also
Mm-hmm.
precious to God. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what the enemy's after. So it's so important for you to have God, that relationship with God, that you're able to fight this demonic influences, that are not able to get to your parents. They come for you.
I mean, think about how many demons that our parents have to cast, and those demons, you think they're just gonna stand and fold their hands? They come back. They
Of
come back, not
course.
necessarily to the parents, but to the kids, to make sure
Yeah.
that they don't fulfill the calling of God. And sorry to cut you off.
No,
To
that's fine.
piggyback from what you just said about the transparency, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to also add something. When we're not transparent with God, pride takes over
Mm.
and secrecy comes in.
Mm. That is
When we're
true.
not transparent with God, pride takes over because we feel like we can handle things on our own.
Mm.
That's what I wanted to
That's deep.
add.
That's deep. No, that's good.
But yes, the spiritual battles and
No, they're
attacks,
real.
it's very, very real. I think we actually, as pastor kids, we encounter that much more than the people outside because
Yes.
the enemy is not happy,
Yeah.
right? let's say somebody possessed with demonic spirit, and
Mm.
as your dad comes in and prays for this person, of course the demon leaves this person, but it's hanging somewhere,
Yeah.
hanging around somewhere, just saying, okay, you cast me out from this person, I'm going to show your kids something.
Like there are some people who struggle with anxiety, and you, let's say for example, like your dad is a pastor, and he prays over them, and he prays over people with depression, and that spirit leaves them. Guess who that spirit is going to come for?
Of
When he
course.
doesn't find an open room
Mm-hmm.
in the life of the pastor,
Mm-hmm.
he goes for their seeds.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear a lot of pastors' kids struggling with depression and anxiety.
That's right.
They're struggling with suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
They're struggling with lust. They're struggling with perversion. They're
Mm-hmm.
struggling with sexual
Pornography,
immorality, a lot of
masturbation.
things.
Yeah.
Because you kick those demons out, they're gonna try to find a host. And if your kids, your seeds are not fully grounded in the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have that coverage over them, or they're not in tune with God, and they're not able to resist those things when they
Mm-hmm.
come at them,
It would take over.
it would take over them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sad. A lot of there are a lot of pastors' kids who are not aware of this, and there are some families who are not really aware of that spiritual warfare.
Yeah,
They
that's
don't know how
true.
to fight it. They see things in the physical realm, but
Mm-hmm.
our walk with God is more than the physical. It's very
Yes.
spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be aware of this. Like even though you're not ready to fight, the battle is still going on. So
Mm-hmm.
it's best for you to like just hop in and just continue in the fight, because whether or
Mm-hmm.
not you give your life to Christ, you're still going to be encountering that battle. It's just that when you're not in tune with God, you're ignorant,
Mm-hmm.
and God forbid the battle could kill you because
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where the weapons are formed from.
Yeah. Ooh.
You don't know where they're coming from. But when you're in Christ, you he gives you the spirit of discernment. You're
Mm-hmm.
able to know where those arrows are flying from,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to put up a shield against those weapons that are formed against you.
That's true.
All right.
That's,
That being said, we're gonna go into another question, because if you lay on that, we're gonna keep going on and on and on and on. I don't know. We're already heading into an hour recording right now, but we might probably have to break this in segments. So
yeah. Yeah. Um. Was I the one that picked last, or I think I?
no, you're the chooser. You get to choose the number, and I get to ask. So we did one, we did four, we did five, and
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Um. I am gonna go with number 3.
number three. What have you learned as a style of ministry that will help you improve your style of ministry? Like, what have you learned as a style of ministry from your parent, and how will that help you improve your style of ministry?
I think what um I would say that I've learned is consistent prayer life.
Mm,
Consistent prayer life. You know the word that dad always uses, PUSH, pray until
push.
something happens,
That's right.
you know? And like you earlier stated, this world is spiritual. There's no way on this planet Earth that you can survive without prayers.
That's right.
You cannot, would not survive without prayers. You need prayers to stay alive.
And we've really seen that prayer has been the
Yes,
engine of our parents'
yes,
functionality in the ministry.
yes,
And without
yes.
that, like they're dried without prayer.
Yeah.
Pray without prayer. Prayer is like the fertilizer, like the water that
Hmm.
revives your walk with God. And without that, like you are a dry Christian if you
Hmm.
don't have a prayer life.
Hmm. And prayer guides your lifestyle, right? If you don't, let's say people who wake up in the morning and don't even
They don't
pray,
talk to
pick up a
God. They
cup of
don't
coffee,
have a
drink, and
conversation with
boom.
God.
And some Christians are like that. Some pastors'
Mm.
kids are like that because they feel like, they already have a spiritual coverage from their parents.
Mm.
Why do I have to struggle in praying when I'm good to go? Right? So with
Sheesh.
with prayers, when you pray and get out in the morning, God guides your tongue, guides
Mm.
what you see, guides how you behave, guide how you talk to other people. Right? When you don't pray before you leave, oh, trust me, you will encounter a lot of things that you did not bargain for.
Yep.
But with prayer minimizes those arrows, minimizes those shots from the enemy. So you're well equipped with prayer before you set in for the day.
Mm.
I know nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. I won't sit down here and say I have a very powerful, strong prayer life. No,
Mm.
it's a step by step
Yeah, you
process.
grow. You grow into it.
You know, of course, I grew up around prayers, but like I said, I just felt like I had a coverage from my parents, so I
Mm.
didn't see the need. And also beside that, I was also living in sin. So why would I have to struggle to pray? And even with that, I honestly, even while I was living in sin, I didn't see any need to pray. There was no passion, there was
Mm.
no drive to pray. You
True.
know, is when you come to God, God puts that drive, puts that thirst, put that passion, right? You get up, you wouldn't
Mm.
even have to fight to get up and pray, because it becomes a second nature to you,
True.
you know. But when you don't have that relationship with God, it becomes a struggle to pray. Sometimes you wouldn't even pray every day. You probably pray twice a week, once a
Mm.
week. But with God, when you have a relationship with God, prayer becomes a habit. It becomes a lifestyle,
Mm.
right? That you not even have to struggle with. It just comes to you. You know that you have to, right?
Yeah.
It's, you won't have to complain and say, "Oh my goodness, so I have to pray every day." Remember when growing up,
Yeah.
right? Every time mom have to pray in the morning before we go to school, oh my gosh, it's like 2 3 hours. Like this prayer is,
Oh my gosh, when mom starts, she never ends, bro.
it's and I'm sitting there and they're like, this does this woman know I'm gonna be late to school? Like I'm running late to school. And she was usually sit down there
I
2 hours, she's still
know. She's
going.
always praying
She's
over
still
us.
going.
Oh, bless
Like
her.
when is this gonna end already? But I underestimated the power of prayer then.
Yeah.
But now I
And it
understand.
worked.
It did work. It did
And
work.
just to clarify, it's not in the length of the prayer, but in your heart posture towards God
That's
when you pray.
right.
Because even if you just have a short communication with God, for your focus and your mind is on God, and you're very, very purposeful in what you're saying to God, you have that concentration on Him, and you have that faith in God, it works. Short prayer, long prayer, the
Hmm.
length doesn't matter. It's your heart posture towards God.
Hmm. And now having a relationship with God now, I
You
love I
understand the value of prayer.
yes, I
And
love to
sometimes you
pray.
you would talk to God and not realize the time passing.
Hmm.
But back
That's
then,
true.
it's like it's unending. Like, can we just keep going? Like, Lord have mercy.
Oh my goodness, gosh, sin is a disease.
For
Oh
real.
my gosh, sin is a disease that will eat you from the inside to the outside and completely destroy you. But I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that prayer, that intercession from my parents.
For me, I don't know. There's quite a lot of things, a style of ministry that I've learned from my parents. Um, I would say for me, their style of ministry, they they minister a lot through hospitality.
Yes, that's true.
They're very, very hospitable.
Yep.
Like it's so intense.
And
And I'm like,
contagious too.
there's no how you can do ministry without being hospitable to people.
That's right.
Because that's really what brings
Oh,
people in and draws them closer.
yes, you're
Like
right.
the realness. That's also something where we've adopted from our parents. The
Hmm.
realness. They are very real to people.
Yep.
And I've seen them a lot of people take that for granted. And
Yes.
that's something that I've struggled with. I've seen a lot of people who my parents have gone over and beyond for, and they turned around and stabbed them in the back. you know it's good to
That
have your
kills me.
relationship with God, because if I didn't have a relationship with God, I could have used that as a standpoint and say I can't do ministry because people are just so wicked.
And ungrateful.
Yeah, I could have used that as a basis for me not being close to God, because I'm
Hmm.
like, what's the point? Because people are a bunch of evil.
Hmm.
But that's not the entirety of people. Like God, you see, the thing that I think that made a difference in my life is that Jesus, when the scripture says that Jesus loved people a lot, but he did not commit
Himself.
himself to anyone.
Yes, that's right.
So I'm still, I'm not perfected in that. I'm a person that really loves deeply. Like when I really love you, I love you. I go all out for you.
She's telling the
And
truth.
when I get hurt, my trust at that moment is broken for
Hmm.
that person. And
Hmm.
it's so hard. I'm not very trusting. So when I do trust you and you break that trust, oh boy, it's really hard. And that's something I bring to God for grace
Hmm.
to overcome.
Hmm.
But I think what challenges me is the art of God still loving people, Jesus Christ, God Himself still loving people on earth, knowing that they're going to betray Him.
Mm,
Oh my Lord. Woo!
that
I
is.
think that's something so hard for me to like understand. Like, oh, He is the sweetest. Like Jesus Christ.